Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our second invited speaker session of the fall semester. Today, we are very happy to host Elinor Carmi, who is a senior lecturer in data politics and social justice at City St. George's University of London. Elinor is a digital rights advocate, feminist, researcher, and journalist who has been working on data politics, data literacies, data feminism, data justice, and internet governance. Elinor, we're so happy to have you, and we're really excited to see this talk. So, please, yeah, the floor is for you.
Amazing. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really excited, even though I wish I was in Canada. I was actually supposed to be in Canada for my second book talk, which happened in March 2020. So, as you can imagine, that did not happen, thanks to COVID. So, I feel like I still need to kind of relive that experience. So, hopefully, I'll be able to someday reach to Canada. Nice to see you all. I'm gonna share my slides, and we can start. Um, and I kind of want to say, obviously, if you have any questions in the end, or if you have questions along the way, then I think there is a chat. So, feel free to write there and I'll respond in the end. So I just kind of want to start before I start my kind of talk to explain why am I working on this kind of in this field of kind of citizen mobilization against big tech. And I think it's in the past kind of 15 years, I started to work on what's happening behind our screen. So I've been doing a lot of work on the ad tech industry, how the standardization of web cookies started, real-time bidding, all of that kind of stuff. And then I gradually continued into how does kind of all of that ecosystem of ad tech, how does that then influence how we engage and understand these environments? So I've been doing a lot of work on data literacy and AI literacy. So how do citizens understand the kind of the environments and systems and data that they work with every day? And I think as I progressed, and I've been involved also with a lot of policymakers, both in the UK and globally. I think I got angry as I went along because I felt like there are not a lot of avenues where citizens can actually have agency and kind of express their concerns or their needs and things like that. So today I'm going to talk about how to resist in the data and AI society. I know it's the fashionable thing to do is to talk only about AI, but obviously AI is linked and is based on data. So I think it's also important for us to remember that. So yeah, let's dive into it. Okay, so as I said before, I'm going to talk about what can citizens actually do to challenge big tech companies, what are kind of their roots. And I think, there isn't a day where AI is not mentioned, but as we've seen in the past few years, people discover that stuff that they're doing, whether it's, I have a WordPress and I discovered this last year, for example. We discover that AI companies are extracting data from different kind of places. Sometimes they don't even know where they're extracting from. For those of you who've seen this now becoming a bit mythical interview with Mira Murat, you said, I'm not quite sure what we're doing with YouTube, but we are doing something with it. We can't really tell you. Of course, for those of you who have academic publishing stuff, include, books, chapters, articles, Meta has been taking our material and extracting it to train their kind of AI systems. And for those of you who are not familiar with the different kind of campaigns that have been going in the UK, there's been massive campaign in the past year by the creator industry and creator, I'm talking about artists. So, in the headlines, we had people like Elton John and different kind of musical artists who have been protesting about different kind of legal instruments that were saying that basically everything can be extracted. And artists have been saying, well, we're not opposed to that, but we want to be compensated fairly. So this has been a massive campaign, which is called Make It Fair, where in a kind of an unprecedented time that all of these kind of publishers that you're seeing here, the newspapers, have collaborated on this project. And this appeared one day a couple of months ago, kind of saying, we want fair deals about, how AI companies can extract our data and how they're using that, because obviously it's our creations, whether it's music or images or text, we want to be fairly compensated. So this was a really big deal in the UK. And I'm going to give several examples from the UK, so I'm going to explain them as well for those of you who are not familiar. Um, this, of course, for those of you who didn't see, this was a couple of weeks ago. You would think this is a South Park episode because it's very similar, but it's actually not. It was a real dinner with Donald Trump, where we saw a lot of the tech CEOs promise a lot of things. There was a leak also of Zuckerberg saying to Trump, if the number that he said is okay, meaning that maybe the numbers that they said there weren't actually true, but who really knows? Um, and I really want to emphasize that I know that maybe in the past year this has been maybe normalized, but I want to say that this is not normal in a democratic society. And this is kind of where I come from, that I think that this should really alarm us. Um, so again, a lot of the time when academics are talking about kind of the tech harms and the stuff that is happening, many people say, especially in the tech industry, say, well, people actually don't really care about privacy. They don't really care because they're doing things that indicate differently. So for example, you could say, people say that they care, but then they would click OK for the cookies, right? So they would say, oh, I care about privacy, but actually I'm going to click, which is called the privacy paradox, where you claim something, for example, that you care about your privacy, but then you do a behavior that indicates otherwise. However, I would argue, and this relies really on a lot of research that I've been doing with citizens, that as you can see here, that people actually don't really know a lot about how these kind of companies operate. I know that probably to this audience, when I say data or algorithms, you pretty much know. You probably also know what is the business model. But when we interviewed people and we did focus groups with people, and we asked them actually something very basic. So it's not obviously the research. This is a research. What you're seeing here is a Pew Research Center we've done as part a couple of years ago as part of the Me and My Big Data project. We asked people, what do they think data are? And most people said, basic things like, oh, it's my email, it's my name, maybe it's my age. But, when we started to drill down, they really didn't have any idea what kind of things could be data. And that is really important because if you don't know what data are, then how can you engage meaningfully in these kind of, consent mechanisms? But also, there's a lot of legal instruments that have the word data in them where people can supposedly exercise their data rights. But if they don't really know what is the essential kind of basic description or kind of a terminology and kind of basic thing that they can engage with it meaningfully, then I think we have an issue. Another thing that we discovered is that a lot of people actually don't know what kind of companies have their data. So, when we asked which organization do you think have your data? So most people just said Google and Facebook. And a lot of people don't really know about all of the ad tech industry, how their data is being extracted and traded between a lot of organizations, but also don't even think that their government can collect data on them. So there's a lot of kind of misunderstanding about how these ecosystems work, and that is obviously intentional. In my book, the one that I didn't come to do a book talk in March of 2020, I actually show how the digital advertising industry, how they lobbied to kind of hide a lot of the stuff that we can see with ad blockers because they said, oh, it's gonna confuse people, so we don't want to show them what's happening behind their screens. So let's make these kind of really nice and slick interface design so that they don't know that cookies are sent to their devices. So that was a lobbying that was successful, and this is why we are interacting with specific designs that are meant to hide a lot of the stuff that is happening behind our screens. So I was really interested to kind of understand what can we actually do about this. And this builds on a paper that I published with Penny Nakao a couple of months ago, which is called Building Data Citizenship and Learning to Resist in a Datafied Society, where I basically ask people who work in digital rights organization to try to understand what works. So what kind of, trying to ask them about the campaigns that they've been involved with, what worked, what didn't work, and things like that. So I'm going to show you kind of our findings, kind of recommendations to what can we actually do about this. So the first thing that they said is contextual awareness. So they said that digital harms and abuses are usually seen as distant and complex and abstract, and people just don't care about things if they can't imagine it happening to them. And I think one of the best examples for that is the post office scandal. And I don't know if a lot of you, I usually, when I talk about this, I ask people in the audience if they've heard about this. Um, but I'm going to explain anyway. So the post office scandal is one of the biggest scandal in UK history, where a technology basically was misused to frame people, and I'll explain. So in the UK, the post office is privatized, like a lot of things. And what happened was that Fujitsu had a software that from 1999 to 2005, I think, was showing that a lot of the post managers of the different branches of the post office were stealing money. Now, these people didn't actually steal money, but the software was making a mistake. Now, these people were saying, hey, you should trust us. We work in these places for a long time. But they didn't believe them because they said, oh, but the software and the algorithm is always right. So thousands of people were accused of stealing money. These people were sued by the post office. Some of them were jailed. Some of them went bankrupt. Some of them killed themselves because they were so distraught by this whole accusation. And only after this television show was made, as you can see here, it's called Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, which was an ITV drama, this case kind of re-emerged in the media and there was a lot of public outcry. And what I'm trying to say here is that a lot of the time when we see these kind of headlines, we can't really imagine how does that actually affect people's everyday life. And this is a very clear example of a data harm that was caused to a lot of people who are still, by the way, harmed by this. These families were bankrupt because they couldn't pay all the money that they were accused of stealing of. Again, some people were jailed and all of these kind of things. Fujitsu, of course, was never kind of made to be responsible for this. Neither did the post office. It's still undergoing investigation. But this just shows you how a television show can really kind of humanize people's stories and show people what's happening. Now, so what we did, so when we were talking to those practitioners, they were saying, experiencing breaches of privacy and bullying and harassment and other threats online as part of people's everyday context mobilizes them to explore avenues to increase their data literacy and think critically about what they can do and object and negotiate the big tech power. And from you probably recognize the picture behind, which is from adolescence, and I think adolescence was a huge received a lot of attention in the UK and I think globally. And I think again, one of the kind of the successes of adolescent is that it really managed to highlight what happens when young boys get into these rabbit holes of toxic masculinity. Now, of course, the show itself also says that, we're not blaming social media exclusively. This is a much kind of bigger social problem. But I think it really helped us realize and make discussions. And in the UK, especially, I don't know about Canada, I would love to hear. But there were a lot of discussions about these kind of online environments. A lot of parents were really saying, we don't know where our kids are, we don't know what they're doing online, and we should actually have a bit more understanding of these environments. So again, these kind of television shows that help people understand stuff that's might be a bit complex or when they are reported in the media is not always it doesn't always show to them, oh, how does that actually relate to me? The second thing is real or imagined concerns. So what we heard from the practitioners that people may develop and share imagined concern that don't really reflect pragmatic threats to digital citizenship, We have an emergency alert test. I don't know if you have that in Canada. We actually had that a couple of weeks ago, and there were a lot of debates about that in the UK. People said, oh, you're intervening in our privacy, you're entering our personal devices and things like that. And the people that we interviewed said that they were quite shocked by the amount of concern that people had about this thing compared to a lot of other things that maybe, like facial recognition or different kind of things like that. Or like you see here with the Google adverts, and this is something that happens in the US, I don't know about Canada, where anti-abortion organizations basically they buy ad and they make sure that when you search in the search engine for abortion clinics, that you're actually diverted to anti-abortion clinics. So again, kind of saying that crucial risks regarding digital rights are kind of not getting the appropriate attention by people. Third, and as you can see by the picture behind, which again, I want to emphasize that this is not normal, that tech CEOs are invited to the inauguration of Donald Trump and are in the front row on the expense of actual politicians. And this is maybe not surprising because not long after, Elon Musk, even though he wasn't even elected as anything really, was in charge of Doge. That obviously didn't last long because the egos of him and Trump couldn't be in the same room. But I just want to say that this is, again, this is not normal in a democratic country. So again, as the other theme that kind of came up was who is responsible for creating and solving the problems? And again, what the kind of the people that we interviewed said, prioritizing corporate profit. Many people feel that big tech lack legitimacy and generate suspicion across the public regarding the way that they handle people's data. We've seen a lot of these issues emerge and reemerge again about kind of who is responsible for those things. And this is an article from a couple of weeks ago in Reuters, which kind of showed that Meta has really problematic bots. And again, I feel like since Trump was elected, a lot of the tech companies feel a bit more relaxed about ethics and things like that. So again, it's worth mentioning, and I'll mention it more towards the end as well. So some of this thing that they said is that people should be able to negotiate different measures that the platforms make about them and their communities. People should be able to be more informed about companies' policies, and there should be some kind of accountability for those harmful processes created by big tech and the results of those processes. Fourth, which is extremely important, resistance possibilities. A lot of NGO practitioners felt that there are few avenues to challenge big tech. Often citizens rely on them, on these kind of organizations, to destabilize power hierarchies or resolve disputes. For those of you who don't know, this organization that you have the picture here is from NOIB, which is a short for None of Your Business, which is run by probably one of the biggest digital rights kind of crusaders in the EU, who's called Max Schrems. He's Austrian, and he's kind of been taking on the big tech companies. And this is one of his kind of biggest project. And I don't know if you can see in the second line that this decision basically took 10 years to be resolved. So I think for us, what does that mean? And again, I'm going to talk about it very shortly. It's extremely problematic that if you want to challenge something that's actually illegal, such as this case, that it takes. So this was about the safe harbor agreement. For those of you who know, I'm happy to kind of expand on that later, but basically said that, the kind of the data that is transferred and processed in the US is problematic because then it doesn't follow GDPR. But here, as you can see, it took a really long time to challenge that. So that is extremely problematic because, again, if you're a normal citizens, who had this time? Who does have the time, the money, the knowledge, the power to actually, wait 10 years for something to like this to actually materialize? And we've seen that for those of you who are following with Google, right? For those of you who've been following with Google, surprise, surprise, they're a monopoly. Who would have guessed? But it's not only that we know that, but everybody, I think, was maybe hoping that there would be some kind of let's say, decision that would deter Google from continuing to accumulate more power than it already has. But unfortunately, the kind of the fines that were given to it are really kind of absurd. And I think, as you can see here, Google stock jumps 8% after the giant avoids worst case scenario in the antitrust case. I think one of the things for me is that what kind of messages it does it send to us as citizens who actually care about technology and want technology to be developed for people and not the expense of people. It sends us a message that, that what are your chances if you want to resist the power. And again, it's important for me to say, and every time I have to say that, I'm not against technology. I'm the first adopter of every technology. I love technology. I just want it to work for me and not in an exploitative way. And I think it's not something that's, it's too much to ask. I think there are other ways to develop technology. I teach that, in the different kind of courses that I teach. But this sends a really bad signal to us as citizens that, you know what, you actually, even if you think that you can maybe restrain some of their powers, well, yeah, it's not really going to deter them. But even despite that, I think it's still important to kind of think about micro resistances. So again, some of the stuff that the people that we interviewed said, using the tools provided by tech companies, such as reporting or blocking somebody, can kind of help them as well. And the more citizens shout about issues in social media, the faster these issues kind of get addressed. This is a UK organization called Glitch. It's focusing a lot about violence against women and violence against marginalized communities. And what they give advice, for example, here is to be kind of active digital citizen where you report and reply and amplify. So again, I think obviously we can do the big stuff, such as, the Google antitrust or the stuff that Max Schrems is doing. There's also micro resistances that we can do to kind of help people express themselves online and in different ways. So all of that kind of going back to, when I introduced myself and I said that I believe that data literacy is really important because when people don't understand such a basic thing like what are data, we are in trouble. And so a couple of years ago, we developed a data citizenship model, which develops beyond kind of the, let's say, utilitarian skills. What do we need to actually know to be a proactive citizen in the data and AI society? And it's divided to three main kind of dimension. One is data doing, which incorporates practical skills involving data handling. I'm going to show you which actions it involves. Data thinking, which incorporates critical skills. And again, I'm going to show you. And for me, the most important thing is data participating. So citizens seek opportunities to exercise their rights as well as contribute and shape their collective data experiences. So when we're talking about data doing, we're thinking about things like accessing, assessing, data creation, data management, and things like that. Data thinking is really important because that's a critical thinking about, understanding, like I said in the beginning, how do cookies work? Every time that I teach my students, they get freaked out so much when I actually tell them how cookies work. And they're like, how is this legal? And I'm like, well, that's a really great question. And knowing how these platforms, what is their business model, and all of these kind of things is extremely important. And the third one, which, as I said, to me is very important, is we need to understand not only all of these things, but if we want to be proactive citizens in a data and AI society, we really need to know what are our rights. What can we do if we want to challenge different kind of things that happen to us every day? How can we mobilize our local communities, or if I want it on an individual level? But also, it's about supporting each other. So my dad, for example, has a tendency to spread a lot of misinformation. I don't know about your family members, but my dad spreads misinformation about stuff all the time on WhatsApp, even though we actually moved all the family to Signal. It's a different thing. But I actually sit with him quite often and kind of explain to him about the stuff that he's doing. Last week, I helped my mom install Brave browser. All of these kind of things, they matter. And I think there's something about networks of literacy, which I'm going to talk shortly. Your networks that are, people that you trust and feel comfortable with, that are so important for us that we can make small interventions like that. So as I said, the citizens have some data rights, but is that enough? We found again in our project that most people don't know what data are, how and when companies are doing their data. which companies and governments are using their data, what is the business model, and how algorithms, cookies, and ad tech work. So, um, I really care about, again, I really care about, using what can we actually do about these things. And I think, again, it's really important to learn from what other sectors are doing. So here, and in the first slide, actually, I showed you a picture from this California Nurses Association, which demand patient safeguarding against artificial intelligence. Which again, they're not saying don't use it at all, but what they're saying, and I'm going to show you shortly, is that you should consult with people who have experience in this and have them in the decision making process instead of top down decisions. You should include the people who are experts in this. So when we're thinking about data and AI citizenship, we should think about learning. So learning how these things work through data literacies. Then we should network. I'm going to talk about shortly, and then act. So again, learning, I'm going to skip about this, but as you know, in the US, for example, I think it's really important to learn that there's a lot of words that you can't use right now when you're conducting research. I know that in Canada, you luckily don't have to, you don't have this, even though I heard that Trump wants you to be the 52th state, right? What was that about? Anyway, we can talk about that later. But yeah, I think it's really important to learn about the different situations that are happening, and then thinking about how you and your community can organize around these issues. So again, stuff that's happening in the US is very slowly seeping into other countries. So even though a lot of people in the UK think, oh, it's just happening in the US, it's also slowly coming to the UK. And how do you kind of think about organizing? So again, as part of one of my projects, we were thinking about what are principles for developing and delivering data literacies. So some of them is ensuring that people feel empowered and have practical alternative routes. So again, I think a lot of people, when I talk to my students, they don't even know that they can use a different search engine, or that you can have a different browser, or that you can have a different, messaging app. So even just using an alternative, technology is something that's really useful. The second thing is consider the design and practical challenge that citizens face. The other one is make clear to citizens their right, as I said before, is citizens, not just consumer. Meet citizens where they are. Address the challenges of adults, because I think a lot of the time, and especially in the UK, I can talk about the UK context, there's a lot of initiatives around data literacies and AI literacies that is kind of addressed to young people and not really adults. And I think that that is something that is a miss opportunity, because a lot of adults actually also need that as well. And of course, provide critical understanding of the power relationship in the data fight society. Second, network. In the UK, in the past decade, hundreds of libraries have been closed. Libraries, I believe, are a place where people can meet for free. It's one of the last free places that we can meet and discuss with people in our community, and it's, I think, extremely important. So again, it's part of a concept that I've developed, networks of literacies, where people, they can meet and discuss and help each other, even if you're helping your parents or even if you're helping your colleagues, just to think about the alternatives. So engaging with people to gain different kind of digital understanding skills and competencies in ways that fit them. And finally, ACT. So again, when I was talking about the nurses, these nurses and they developed the Nurses and Patients Bill of Rights, which is guiding principles for AI justice in nursing and healthcare. So again, it's not about saying we don't want this technology. It's not, I think there's a lot of confusion that if you resist, that it means that you're against technology. And it's not about that. It's about doing technology on people's own terms and not on, the big tech companies' terms. So again, I'm happy, you can check this organization out. Um, and again, some of other types of organization that we've been seeing recently is because the US government is deleting a lot of archives that you have online. Archivists are working to identify and save thousands of data sets. One of the biggest organization is called Data Rescue Project, where they're trying to save a lot of data sets that are being deleted, especially around environmental and gender and LGBTQI topics. Um, and as we've seen as well, one of the most successful kind of negotiation was around the SAG-AFTRA, which are a union of the actors. And I think that was a really great example of how you can actually resist and try to do an agreement in your own terms. And not only that, what I really liked is that they really circulated a lot of really useful guidelines for their members that also illustrate, what they want, how you define things, and what are the terms that they are fighting for. And I thought that that was really useful. In the UK, a couple of weeks ago, we had the TUC, which is the Train Union Congress, which is kind of an amalgamation of a lot of unions in the UK that are demanding for an AI that is kind of consulted with the different kind of unions and sectors. So as you can see here, it's calling for conditions attached to tens of billions of pounds of public money spent on AI research, ensuring workers secure a digital dividend of any AI productivity gains, all this kind of to make sure that people are in the loop and people are also being consulted in all of these interventions that are happening in their sectors. So where do we go from here? And I think that one of the maybe disadvantages of academia, in my view at least, is that a lot of the time what we do is we say, this is problematic, and then mic drop, and then we leave. And what that means is that, if we don't offer solutions, then we leave it to tech bros to leave to, for their kind of narratives of their solutions to kind of thrive. And I think that one of the things that we can do better is according to, scientific empirical research suggests, how can we move on from here? I understand it's not maybe common in some countries or some disciplines, but I think that this could actually a strength of academics because we have, a lot of knowledge and a lot of research to back up what we say. So I think that we can do better in kind of communicating how do we think that there were, according to our project, what we can actually do about it. So this is what we've done in this paper as well. And so we have advice for five different kind of bodies or institutions in society of what they can do better. So the first one with governments, they should have robust legislation and enforcement. As we saw, it's not enough to have a legislation. It's not enough that they said that Google is a monopoly because if the enforcement is not going to be good enough, then it's actually meaningless. The second thing is encourage other types of business model because surveillance capitalism is not the only business model and shouldn't be. Another thing is legislate mandatory testing and consultation throughout the process of technology design development before it comes to the market. Also have community representatives when you're thinking about different kind of interventions and providing non-digital options, which I think is really important and maybe not discussed enough, but with the environmental issues that we're experiencing across the world, I think it's really important to keep in mind that the digital might not always be there. As I said before, a lot of these things also relate to the government's responsibility to help people know about the different regulators. So the ICO, which is the Information Commissioner's Office in the UK, is the regulator responsible for personal data. However, not a lot of people are even aware that that is existing, as you can see, according to their own research. And that is a huge problem. If you don't even know that a regulator exists, how can you actually exercise your rights? So that is a huge issue. Another big issue is a collaboration like this, where the UK government collaborated with OpenAI and said, we don't even know what is the problem, but you're going to tell us what is the problem and you're going to solve it to us. Now, again, this did not go through the appropriate mechanism of procurement. And the problem with that is that all of these kind of really deep collaboration with these companies is that it then becomes a bit tricky when you want to regulate them or tell them that they might need to change some of their actions. And again, I'm not saying that these companies shouldn't exist, but I'm just saying
We
that these
lost
kind
your
of,
sound, or at least I did.
oh,
It's working now.
Sorry, it sounds good to me.
okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's good, Eleanor.
Okay. Sorry, it's good to not. Yeah, it's always tricky with these things. You don't know if you're talking to the void or not. So yeah, so what I was saying is that it is really important to rethink about these relationships. Moving on to big tech, as I said before, there's been a huge backsliding of a lot of big tech since Trump was elected to fire a lot of their ethics groups. The latest ones is from TikTok, that they fired their whole Berlin privacy and ethics teams. So these things are extremely problematic. They need to provide better transparent policies, develop more user-friendly policies and support mechanism, and of course, be accountable for their harms. I'm going to skip this. Media, as I was talking before at the beginning, television has a huge power. And I think, when we're thinking about these even fiction shows like Adolescence, like Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, but also things like Black Mirror, they help inform us, they help us humanize, they help us think about the context. How does this actually relate to my life, and what can I maybe do about it? Um, I think it's also important to invest in journalism. We have huge journalistic kind of investigative reporting that was really influential, such as the Snowden revelation, Panama Papers, Facebook whistleblowers, and onwards. That have really helped us understand the stuff that is happening, and again, create more fiction, television, and films to help us contextualize what's happening. NGOs who are already doing a lot of important work can help more by raising more awareness and context, developing different kind of negotiation power for society. This is the Good Law Project in the UK that are helping people to kind of ask Facebook to not show them tailored content according to EU law. And this is an organization that I really like called Witness, that are helping different organizations to kind of understand, especially deepfakes more, but I really recommend you to check out their amazing work. And last but not least, the society. There are different kind of initiatives like this one from Liverpool city region, where they were talking about how citizens want their data and AI to be used. So there are different kind of ways to involve citizens through citizens council, juries, and collectives. Um, I'm also part of an organization called the Society for Hopeful Technologists. Unfortunately, it's only in the UK for now, but we are a group of people who work in technology, academics, journalists, activists who want to create strategies of how can we create a technology that is hopeful, that is positive, that actually helps people, and that is, different from what we're experiencing now, that doesn't benefit a few billionaires, that benefits the society. And that's it. Thank you very much. I will
Eleanor,
stop sharing.
thank you so much for taking us through all this. I'm just going to pause the recording before we get started on our question period.